we need to be movers. We've become very sedentary in our modern day times. And so just
Mm.
like watch a baby develop, right? Like they go through rolling, crawling, squatting, standing up, moving, running. You don't teach a baby to do any of those things. They're playing on the floor. They're doing all sorts of activities and putting their body in all sorts of positions. And then maybe grade one comes around and all of a sudden we start telling people to sit all the time. You have to sit or you're not paying attention. You're not like a good student. So we basically pacify people into these very static postures where people sit all day long and they're not utilizing all the shapes that our bodies are meant to express. And as a result, certain areas just start to get very stiff and like that stiffness is like okay to begin with, but then it's just going to keep building and building if you don't start to get your body to explore its full potential like what we do when we're younger.
In this episode, we will learn how to address the root cause of pain and teach our entire body how to move together. Helping us with this is the founder and the owner of From the Ground Up Physiotherapy. Welcome to the show, Greg. How are you doing?
Thank you so much for having me, Toby. I appreciate it. I'm
Thank
doing
you so
great.
Thank you so much. I'm happy you're doing great, and I'm so grateful that you are on this show right now for a soulful conversation about pain and how to deal with pain, how to, overcome it and heal from it permanently. So while preparing for this conversation, I was reading about you, and I've got to know that you are not just, in this physiotherapy business because you went to school to learn it, but you yourself had that experience at the age of 19 when you sustained an ankle injury that forever changed your life. So I'm very, very eager and curious to learn about this experience of yours and how it's changed your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I can happy to share. So I'm now 30 years old. So this ankle injury already happened 11 years ago. But basically, up into that point of this ankle injury, I was always getting injured in all sorts of different ways. I was a very wild child, broken bones, stitches. Everyone knew me as like, oh, Greg is in the hospital again. I was like always getting hurt. And when you have a broken bone, generally speaking, the bone breaks and it heals properly, and you get back to doing things you want to do. But unfortunately, this injury ended up being something that lingered around. So I had sprained my ankle, and normally an ankle sprain, the healing process could be 2, 3 months. But for me, this ankle sprain lingered and lingered, and it wasn't getting better after months and months. I ended up starting to do some therapy, some physical therapy, seeking the help from professionals to try and rehab my injury. And despite what they were giving me, I was following exactly their plan. The problem still continued on. So we're going 6 months, a year, 2.5 years in. I eventually ended up seeking out a surgical option because whatever was going on wasn't really helping me. And after surgery, I thought, all my problems would be over eventually. We were looking for the understanding of what was going on because the doctors were confused. I had to get CT scans, MRIs, X-rays, and the problem was a bit confusing to them given like the nature of what was going on. And what they had found was that the tendon was that I had on my ankle wasn't solidly attached to the bone. So every time the tendon would pull on the bone, it was causing like micro movements to take place, and I was experiencing in my pain. So they kind of got rid of the piece of bone that was there. And I thought, I'd wake up after surgery a few weeks later, I'd start to be okay again, or maybe a couple months. But now, after surgery, I now have hip pain and back pain and foot pain. So it's kind of like just adding on. And I'm very much an active person. And at that point in time, I felt very depressed because I couldn't do the things I wanted to do anymore.
Mhm.
And I thought I hit this very low point where, despite all the things I was trying and desperately seeking out solutions, I didn't know where to turn. And it was really only realizing that I couldn't necessarily rely on anyone else but myself to solve this problem because no one else really cares about your health more than you do.
Yeah.
And I was now going on a massive search of like who's the smartest people in the world that knows about foot care because when it comes to foot and ankles, people typically think that, like, all right, what you need to do is you need to do these isolated movements at the foot, the ankle, calf stretching, and calf raises, and that's what was given to me. And if that doesn't work, you go into orthopedic shoes and orthotics, and that's the solution to the problem. But if you came to me with a neck problem and I just gave you a brace for your neck, and I just said, okay, well, let's say, Toby, your neck pain is going to be fixed with this brace, you'd obviously look at me like I'm a little crazy. Like, wait, aren't you going to give me like some exercises to understand how my neck works with the rest of my body? But unfortunately, when it comes to foot care, we kind of think that the foot is this like isolated part of the body, even though it's the foundation of our body. And it was really only until I started realizing how important it sounds so obvious, but like how important our feet are as our foundation and how do we get the foot to work with the rest of the body, did I start to make progress. And, chipping away at it slowly but surely, I ended up getting to the point where now, like all of these years later, I now go hiking barefoot. I could go slacklining, so I could walk between two trees, on a tightrope essentially. But this all came from like a deep understanding that the body's all connected and it's about learning to get stronger and moving better rather than relying on the technologies that we often hear about, that we need like motion control shoes and orthotics and all sorts of bracing, but rather to realize that there's a deep connection between our feet all the way up to our head. Hence, from the ground up is the philosophy that I have in my clinic.
Oh, now I understand why your physiotherapy clinic is from the ground up, from the foot upwards to the brain.
Yes.
Oh, brilliant. Why did you say the foot is the foundation or the feet are the foundation of our body?
Well, if you just think about a building, like what is the foundation of a building? It's got to be sturdy and strong. Like you literally excavate something deep and then you're connected to the root of the building. And so our root of our buildings are two little small feet that are extremely complex. We've got a foot over here with 26 bones, 33 joints. Like there's hundreds of tendons and ligaments. It's this very complex structure that's meant to support the rest of our body. So it is our foundation because it starts literally at the ground. It's the only piece of us that touches the ground. We're no longer crawling the way we used to from our ancestors. So our foundation must be sturdy, strong, but also mobile and supple because our feet aren't meant to be these rigid structures, but they're supposed to be rigid and also the ability to kind of be bouncy and springy. So our feet play both roles. So it's important that we train them to be comfortable doing both tasks that they're meant to do.
Yeah, yeah, makes a lot of sense. And thanks so much for sharing your story. And when you were sharing that, I got to understand the difference between holistic physiotherapy and the normal physiotherapy or the classic physiotherapy. Like you talked about, in the normal physiotherapy, for example, could have maybe motorized shoes or some particular equipment that you could use to address a particular issue or pain. But according to what I've understood from you so far, that's not actually the solution, right? Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry, we cut out for one sec
yeah,
there.
it froze for a
I
minute. I'm
hear
so
you
sorry
now.
for that. Yeah, awesome. So I was just asking about, so uh, why would you say we should prefer or go towards the holistic approach when it comes to physiotherapy?
Yeah, I think that most people, when they do think of physical therapy or chiropractor or any sort of professional, the usual idea is that you're going to go and receive treatment, that you're going to lie on a table and the other person is going to fix your problems with their hands
Mm.
and like focus on the site of pain. Let's say I've got knee pain, I got ankle pain, I got back pain, and we're going to massage that area and all of a sudden the pain's going to go away. And while that sounds nice in theory to like get fixed by someone else, the reality is unfortunately that only leads to temporary pain relief. So someone goes, they get a massage, they feel super relaxed, but 2, 3 days later, like, oh, it keeps coming back. Why does it keep coming back? Because if you lie on the table, you're not mimicking the demands of real life, which is to be upright against gravity. And so the whole process of physical therapy is to be physical, to change our movement patterns, to teach the whole body to work in unison so that no part gets overworked. And typically when people have pain, it's just one area that's just being like, hey, I need some help here.
Mm.
Not everything is showing up to the party, and we need to basically teach all the parts to connect better together so that everything works in harmony.
Ah, okay. And I guess that is why a lot of people are dealing with chronic aches and pains nowadays because we are trying to like go some other ways that our body is not really accepting,
Yeah, because they're
basically.
trying to impose their will on you. And again, like while it feels good to receive treatment, the reality is we need to be movers. We've become very sedentary in our modern day times. And so just
Mm.
like watch a baby develop, right? Like they go through rolling, crawling, squatting, standing up, moving, running. You don't teach a baby to do any of those things. They're playing on the floor. They're doing all sorts of activities and putting their body in all sorts of positions. And then maybe grade one comes around and all of a sudden we start telling people to sit all the time. You have to sit or you're not paying attention. You're not like a good student. So we basically pacify people into these very static postures where people sit all day long and they're not utilizing all the shapes that our bodies are meant to express. And as a result, certain areas just start to get very stiff and like that stiffness is like okay to begin with, but then it's just going to keep building and building if you don't start to get your body to explore its full potential like what we do when we're younger.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's very important for us to keep on moving our body and keep on, yeah, exercising it, working it out as it's meant to be, basically. Yeah. But can you teach us what to do? Maybe there's some little skills, little things that we could do to teach our body to keep on moving the way it's supposed to be, to move together.
For sure. So I think one of the first things to realize is that we need to feel our feet and we need to feel the ground. And I'm a big advocate for a lot of my clients to spend more time barefoot or
Mm-hmm.
in like minimalist or barefoot like shoes. So just from a standpoint of like an audience here. So if we're looking on YouTube, what I'll describe is the idea for most people is that they put their feet inside a very maximalist shoes. What I mean by that is that they have a lot of technology. And like when people hear, oh, I have good shoes, they think the more technology, the better. So this idea of wearing like an Asics or a New Balance or a Nike, all shoes that have motion control and arch supports, and like, yeah, I've got a good shoe, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is when I put my foot inside a shoe that has all this technology, well, I stop relying on what I was born with. For hundreds of thousands of years, we have never relied on this fancy technology shoes to support our body. And when we start to do that, what ends up happening is our feet become a little silly. They become dumb because they're just relying on these shoes. And so one of the problems with typical modern day running shoes, if we think about like a high heeled shoe that's like a triangle, like right? To a lesser extent, typical running shoes are tapered at the toe box, meaning that they kind of compress your toes to be less spread out than they are when we're born. So if you look at like a tribe, in the Amazon forest or somewhere in Africa where they've never had contact with human beings, you see these thick, wide feet. And look at babies, thick, wide feet. Or not so thick yet, but they're cute and they're spread out, right? But then we start to shove our feet inside of shoes that basically compress our toes that also don't have any flexibility and also have like a heel. So imagine a high heeled shoe. Why does someone like to wear a high heeled shoe? Because it accentuates curves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say a woman wants to wear high heeled shoes, so it's going to pop things, right?
Yeah.
But if you're wearing even a half inch, well, what does that do to our body? It throws our body out of alignment. And so all of a sudden, our feet are squished together, there's no flexibility, and our feet are out of alignment, our whole body becomes out of alignment, then that's a simple thing that, wait, if I just go barefoot more often or I go inside of shoes that promote barefoot like conditions, then I could start to connect to my body better. So that's a huge thing that I promote to people as a very simple thing that they could do in order to get started on this journey towards becoming more connected to themselves.
Yes, yeah. So they're like some particular kind of, like I know from friends around me, they say moving towards this kind of shoes with that looks like as it feels as if they're walking barefooted, but you're not walking barefooted. It's like this. I don't know what their names are basically, but
Yeah, so there's a lot of different brands that exist. There's a lot in Germany. I think there's something called Be Nimble or Joe Nimble, but
mm,
there's Vivo Barefoot out of the UK. There's Zero Shoes. There's tons and tons of brands that exist that are out there that basically all a shoe is meant to do is protect your foot, but not impose on your foot. Yes, I don't want to get glass stabbed on my foot. That's why I wear a shoe.
Yeah.
But I also don't want something that blocks all movement from taking place. So if you think about like a cast, for example, what does a cast do when you're broken, have you a broken arm? It kind of immobilizes things to let things heal.
Hmm.
But after I'm out of a cast, well, my arm is very stiff. I can barely move it and I lose all my muscle. Well, if we're inside of shoes that basically cast our feet, well, then essentially we're going to be losing all the muscles of our feet, our foundation, and we're also going to create a very stiff foundation. And so all of a sudden now our backs start to overwork because they don't trust our feet to do their job like they're supposed to.
Mm.
So yes, a huge element is just connecting back to our roots and back to our feet in a way that like traditional technological shoes kind of um, dampen or disconnect us from our foundation.
Ah, yeah. Okay. I mean, permit me to digress a little bit, but we are talking about walking barefooted or wearing zero shoes or barefoot shoes. Um, Growing up, I got to learn about, people saying early in the morning when the dew is still fresh on the grasses, you should walk on the grasses barefooted. Do you have any idea on that or any opinion on that?
Yeah, of course. I think it's great. Look, if you're in a park or somewhere where like there's not glass and basically people overthink, oh, there's just glass everywhere in the world. So,
Mm,
like it's safe to walk in a park barefoot for the most part, right? So 100% connecting your feet to Mother Earth, there's an element one both of just like feeling all the different textures and surfaces. If we look at like our modern day world, everything is flat and even and hardwood floor, concrete and cement, asphalt. That's all we walk on. But if you go to a park, you go to nature, you have rocks, roots, earth, dirt, tree, like we're walking on Mother Earth, and there's this connection that we feel both from a standpoint of all the different textures and stimulation that our nerve endings are seeking. Our hands have lots of nerve endings to be able to detect texture.
yeah.
Our feet are the exact same thing. And so that helps to optimize and guide proper movement when our feet are feeling all these different, are getting stimulated. And so many people's feet today, they're like, they're like in rubber gloves. They're so soft and sensitive, and it actually has a huge impact on the rest of the body because if our feet are overly sensitive, the rest of the body becomes overly sensitive because it can't just relax into the ground.
Mm,
And then there's this idea of like energetics, right? We are energetic beings. If you measure my heart rates, you are measuring my EKG, the electrocardiogram, right? Well, from that standpoint, if we never connect our feet to the ground, well, we actually could um, there's like interesting studies showing that when you connect your feet to the ground, your inflammation in your whole body goes down because we're just kind of um, rooting ourselves back to the ground or grounding ourselves. That's what it's called. It's like when a plane is up in the sky, they often ground it after it's back down as a means of discharging excess electric energy. And this is kind of the same thing with us. And so I think it's very interesting from multiple standpoints, from the sensory standpoint, from the electrical standpoint. But it's so obvious. Like I don't have to make so many arguments. This is where we were born, and so, as much as possible in our lives, we should be barefoot, or if not barefoot, in barefoot like conditions with shoes like this.
mm, yeah. And that thing when it comes to faith is that I've seen pictures of people drawing like different parts of our organs and how they are connected to our feet. Is that true? Is that really?
I look, I'm not fully aware of all the traditional Chinese medicine like
Mm,
connections, but I'm all for realizing that there's an intelligence to the body that we don't fully understand and can't be measured by traditional science. But I think these practices have been done for thousands of years in different cultures, and so I think it's very arrogant for us to discount these things without realizing that there's so much that we don't understand.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot to still explore there. I
For
think
sure.
I have to work on that also myself. Yeah. So now, I've been living my life for a long time, maybe wearing the wrong shoes, and I'm maybe trying to recover from all of these chronic pains and aches that I have. But my goal, Greg, is to be able to move my body like a kid again, to be able to be agile again. What do I have to do right now to be able to get to that goal?
So, first things first, I think part of us realizing that That is a wonderful goal because a lot of times people want to get stronger and more muscles, and I think I'm all for that, but it's always the how in which we go do that.
Mm,
If we go and spend all of our day sitting down and then we go to a gym and we're very robotic in the way that we move, just these linear movements, squats, deadlifts, things that don't involve rotation and movement of our spine,
mm,
then we're going to start to become very good at what we train.
mm,
So if all of it starts with an intention of moving like a kid again, well, why don't we study what kids do?
mm,
They play games. They're springy. They include jumping as part of like their natural way of being. And I think one of the most amazing things that you could start to do is just start to train like a kid, like crawl on the floor, do rolling activities, be outside more with your training so that you're playing more games. The other practice that I like, and I think the best way of explaining this is maybe through a visual, but it's a practice that I've been doing for the last 3 years called rope flow. So rope flow is not about skipping rope, not jumping through rope, but rather imagine I've got a rope in my hand
mm.
and I pass it like a figure of eight on both sides of my body.
Yeah.
And so you'll see that my body kind of looks like a belly dancer in the sense that I get one shoulder going lower and then one shoulder going higher. And I could do
Mm,
all sorts of different patterns with it, but it kind of looks like more martial arts, but with a rope, like a nunchucks almost. And
mm.
it's very easy because it's a very light rope that I use. But that's an awesome practice to start to explore 3D movement. And that's the key is training in ways that explore the spinal engine, or this concept that instead of being always core tight, squeeze, squeeze that you hear in the gym,
Yeah.
actually letting go and chasing stability through mobility. So instead of always squeezing, the only time I really like to squeeze things is if I have weight on my back. And even then, I'm not the biggest fan of compressing my spine. I rather learn to create like a sense of stability by exploring the edges of my comfort zone instead of always trying to be so stiff and rigid, rather like more mobile and free in my movement. So those are some cool places to start with, just like training unconventionally with ropes, with swinging tools. So I'm big into like Indian clubs, if you've ever heard of them, and mace training.
Oh, okay.
These are all different practices that involve like what have human beings always done? We've ran, we've crawled,
Mm,
we've swung tools, throwing, and so there's a lot of interesting things along the lines of swinging. Because when I swing tools, I start to get my rib cage more involved in the movement, and it connects me from the ground up, from feet to hands, and all the way in between, learning to create these more rhythmical patterns with the body.
yeah. I mean, must totally agree with that because of recent, yesterday I went rock climbing
Yeah,
and I was like, I mean, that was my second time ever. The first time I did it was like maybe 5, 6 years ago.
that's
And,
awesome.
and yesterday I was just like, oh, it's people just climbing rocks, it's time wasting, it's no exercise. And I started and I was like, oh, this is really so much
Yeah.
exercise and so much
Again, it's
movement.
just basically crawling upwards, right? And we're using these like what's called a contralateral pattern, or just like opposite leg,
Yeah.
and these are the movements that are just part of walking and running. And you'll be surprised that I could get someone who's 25 years old crawling on the floor and they lack the coordination to do that,
Mm,
but they didn't when they were a baby. So it's
yeah.
like they've unlearned a lot of things and they just start to move in these very, rigid robotic ways. And so learning to rock climb and do activities that are just very part of what we've always done,
Mm,
you know, good things start to happen from a standpoint of the core connecting the limbs together. So it's really cool that you
yeah.
explored that.
Yeah, it was a really fun experience, and I think I should do that more instead of just having this traditional workout that one does and all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
Do you also have any experience with yoga, for example, when it comes to getting rid of chronic pains? Does any kind of yoga movement helps also?
I believe more in sequencing of movements than necessarily just static stretching. I think sometimes like I'm all for people doing movement practices that they enjoy and bring them peace
Mm,
and connect themselves to their body. Yoga's done barefoot, it's great. But I think sometimes with yoga, it's too often like training certain qualities that I don't love in terms of just like only static stretching. And that's not necessarily how muscles want to work. Like when we walk, we're kind of on a muscle, we load those muscles, and then we explode off those muscles. So
Mm.
I'm more for connecting from like a strengthening and lengthening through movement than just static holds. I think there's a time and place for these things, but I think if that's the only thing that you're doing, I'm not the biggest promoter of yoga in that sense. Again, like people that could be all for you. Like one thing that happens often with yogis is they become hypermobile and they lack some stiffness. So we often hear the word stiff and we think that's a bad thing. But there's a spectrum between mobile and like the ability to actually create tension. When we want to pick something up, we need to create tension from our foot to our calf to our hamstring to our butt to work together. And oftentimes these yogis, they don't know how to, they lack tension in certain areas. And as a result, they can get hurt or they're not moving. So I sometimes will see yogis in my clinic and, we're actually training a bit more of the tensile component of rehab rather than just chasing more mobility, because mobility for mobility's sake without like the control through that range, in my opinion, is too much of a goal that's focused on like what these like cool looking positions are without necessarily connecting a sense of control through those ranges.
Yeah. Ah, okay. Well, so Greg, if I come to your clinic today, what do I expect to get from the ground up physiotherapy?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I want to explain to you the process of physiotherapy. If
Yeah.
this is your first time, I'm going to make sure you understand the goals of today. If you've been suffering from pain for a long time, I want you to make sure you understand that first and foremost goal is to get to know your goal. Like what are we hoping to achieve? And I want to explore the roots of why it's going on. So I take an assessment with someone where I'm going to look at how their body's moving, how they bend, how they extend, how they side bend, how they rotate. Where is their strength coming from? Where do their weaknesses lie? And once I understand a full picture, I want to make sure they understand it in very simple terms to understand like the why in the process of what we're doing. Because if I just start explaining something or telling them what to do without them buying into the process and understanding like here's where you're at, here's where we want to go, the likelihood of someone being compliant with what I'm asking to do is very low. So it's very important that there's a buy-in into the process. And then essentially I'm going to, for the most part in my sessions, I don't use my hands that much in terms of like imposing, manual therapy. There's a time and a place, and it's one tool in the toolkit, but most of my session is just movement. So I'm teaching someone how to stack their body. What that means is I'm teaching them how to get like on one leg and organize their body in a way where all the muscles are going to like kick on. And it's like you could think of a runner, how the runner is going to be like bent knee and then leaning slightly forward, like they're ready to kind of run a race. So I teach people, depending on what I see in their assessment, how to get stacked and then move their bodies in areas that their body has avoided for a long time. Let's say they have back pain, but maybe that back pain is coming from an old ankle injury because they've avoided putting weight into certain areas. So I'm going to go ahead and stack their body in new ways and then start to explore the edges of their comfort zone where their nervous system has kind of avoided based off their previous injuries or their beliefs about how they're supposed to move their body. And by a graded wise process of kind of exposing their body to more load, more speed, more confidence through harder and harder tasks over time, all of a sudden people are stronger than they were even prior to their injury because we're doing new things and new movements and getting everything kind of connected and moving well together.
Ah, yeah, that's awesome. And is it like a kind of mentality I have to bring along with me so that all of this can work, or I can just come as I am and the process
Well,
is going to work
it
for
all
me?
depends on the resistance of that person. So if they believe, this approach sounds like out of the box, well,
Mm.
unfortunately, it sounds out of the box because so much of the therapies that we're given are these short-term, quick fix solutions. Where like, just get cracked, 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 and boom, go on your way. But again, your body is smarter than that. And like, why are you crooked, right? And the moment you get cracked into perfect alignment, well, your body's going to go out of that if it doesn't learn how to sustain these positions. So
Mm.
the key thing is like learning to be fluid and strong and the mentality is all depend on the individual in front of me. So I need to get someone to buy in, like we talked about, in a way where they're empowered to take ownership in this process. Like I said, when it was my pain, like no one cares more about my pain in my body than myself. And so I'm here to to be someone's guide. I'm not here to fix them. I'm here to like show them the way that I went through and that many of my hundreds and hundreds of clients have gone through, which is to, learn to start getting stronger, more mobile, and having the whole body connected in a way where not one part is taking on all the load.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. Wow, I really appreciate, speaking with you, Greg, and learning so much about physiotherapy and learning about this, I won't say unconventional, but very holistic way towards, moving your body and making everything work together towards letting go or healing from every kind of chronic pain. Yeah. But one more question before I let you go.
Yeah, of
And that
course.
question is, in this day and age, we see it a lot. And I don't know if you have some quick tips that you could give to us to help us, exercise a little bit, mix things up a little bit so that we don't end up having back pains from
Yeah,
sitting.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is gonna again sound unconventional in my way of describing this, but if we were to go to, 10 years ago, I visited India, okay?
Mm,
And in India, I saw people that were 80 years old that could do an ass to grass squat, meaning they could fully sit down and be in a position like that. Where, like, imagine, we're in the forest and you're going to the washroom to to take a poop in the woods.
mm,
What would someone do? They would squat all the way down, right? Now, if I asked most North Americans or Westerners in Germany or Canada that are 30 years old to do that, they probably wouldn't be very comfortable holding that position for very long, or they wouldn't be able to do it. But the reason why I mention this is, what is the position of someone's back when they're in a full squat position? Their spine is rounded and relaxed, a little bit slouchy, right? But what have we been told our whole lives? To sit up straight, to stand up straight, to keep our shoulders down and back into these positions where we're creating a lot of tension, actually. Like, look how good my posture is, or maybe not. Because if I'm sitting like this,
mm,
holding myself, well, that's the equivalent of me squeezing my hands all day long like this, right? But if I just learn to relax my body and just sigh and give myself my low back permission, just relax, all those muscles could finally let go, because when we hold ourselves like this, we're constantly creating tension. So slouching is not the devil that we've all been told, because if you watch like a child play on the floor, they flex their spine. But we've been ingrained in the yogi world to kind of keep our back straight all the time. And so it's part of like spending more time on the floor, taking more time to be in a squat position. Maybe you need to elevate your heels. Standing up sometimes while you're working, changing positions more frequently is definitely part of the solution. But when you are sitting, give yourself permission to relax over here instead of this need to always be in this like, oh, I need to make sure other people see I'm in a good posture right now. Because right now I can feel my back engaged versus here, well, we talked about the idea of squatting as a relaxed position. So I want to relax when I'm sitting.
I also relax when I'm sitting. I don't pay attention to sitting 90 degrees or something, or
Yeah, just fine,
usually
relaxing.
relax. Wow. Thanks so much, Greg. What's the best way to connect and work with you for people out there who would like to,
Yeah,
engage?
absolutely. So you could follow me on Instagram or Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. I post either long form or short form content on all those channels at Ground Up Physio. So the word ground up, and then physio is PHYSIO. And just to mention, I also have a program available that's online, teaching the exact same system that I teach to my one-on-one clients, that I packaged together into like a daily program that people could do in the comfort of their own home. So if they're dealing with foot pain or back pain, whatever types of pains they're aching with, it's going to take you through the stepwise process that I teach my clients of how to rebuild your body from the ground up, that you could do, that's going to focus on learning full body holistic movements rather than this isolated approach. So if people are interested, they could go to my website and I can make a discount code available for your listeners.
Yes, sir.
We could put that in the show notes for them, because I think it's really important for people to realize that there's hope out there. And sometimes, yes, this is an outside of the box approach, but that's kind of what's always changed the fabric of humanity, has been the outside of the box thinkers. And when I was dealing with my pains for many years, I tried all the traditional things. So like you, I have been there and I know what it's like to go through some types of movements that are very like It's like too robotic, too isolated, and not really connecting the body. There's better ways that are out there, and I've gone through the process of kind of vetting out the solutions which work and which don't. And so I wanted to make this program available to people that I can't just see in my clinic, but make it more available to the public at large.
That's wonderful. That's a great mission to have, Greg. Thank you so much for being on this podcast and sharing so much insight about this. I'm sure you've touched the life of hundreds of thousands of people out there right now, and I'm so grateful for that. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Toby.
Hey there, podcast enthusiasts. Are you ready to add a little sparkle to your day? If you're loving the insightful conversations and captivating stories on Mirror Talk Podcast, here's a friendly nudge to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on the empowering messages and thought-provoking discussions we bring to your ears. But wait, there's more. We're all about spreading positivity and inspiration, and you can be a part of it too. How? By sharing the love with your friends and family. Share this episode with your loved ones, and let's create a ripple effect of empowerment and growth together. And hey, if you've been enjoying what you hear, why not take a moment to leave us a glowing 5-star review? Your feedback fuels our passion to keep delivering content that resonates with you. So hit that subscribe button, share the love, and leave us a review. Let's keep the conversation going and spread the Mirror Talk magic far and wide. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, your support means the world to us.